Welcome to the world of probiotic foods. This is Cultured Food Life with your host, Donna Schwenk.
Welcome, everybody. And today we're going to be talking about Einkorn wheat and specifically your Einkorn sourdough starter. It is just one of my favorite things to cook with. And I have been using Einkorn flour for everything these days. I've just replaced a lot of my regular recipes with Einkorn because I seem to do so much better on it than anything else I've ever used. I really love all the health benefits that you get from it, the wonderful taste that it imparts, but it's also very versatile. And it's one of the only pastas I've been using that I buy now on a regular basis. I get it from Jovial Foods, and their traditional spaghetti pasta, and then they have other ones too, like corkscrew and penny pasta. It tastes just like regular pasta, and I don't have the blood sugar problems with it. I just do so much better. It just really creates a wonderful flavor in the food. I highly recommend it. I'm not really getting anything for saying this. I just really, really love it. It's the most ancient wheat, and if you struggle with regular wheat, this is a much, much, much better choice for those who struggle with gluten problems because it's a completely different gluten. And it works, Einkorn works like a prebiotic in the gut. It creates short chain fatty acids that we all need. That it helps us to stay healthy. And the phytic acid inhibits the absorption and nutrients. And Einkorn has less than 50% phytic acid compared to regular wheat. It is also loaded with nutrients. 100 grams of Einkorn contains 28% of the necessary magnesium you need a day. It also has 38% of the RDV for vitamin B6. It has tons of vitamin A, which is why the bread is, or the flour is kind of an orangey color, a slightly orange color. And most ancient species of wheat that we consume today come from Einkorn wheat. And Einkorn wheat has about 14 chromosomes as compared to other wheat, which have 28 to 42. And the reason this is important is that a lot of studies show that ancient wheat with its fewer chromosomes have lower levels of gluteins, which are proteins that can cause sensitivity in those who struggle with gluten. And actually, the lady who really brought this wheat back because it was kind of going extinct because people weren't growing it anymore was because her daughter had severe gluten allergies. And what gluten is defined as a stretchy protein that's left behind after the starch is washed away from the wheat flour dough. When you consume bread, the gluten proteins break down into smaller units called peptides, which are strings of amino acids. And there are certain proteins in most wheat products that have been found to cause harm with those with sensitive guts that are, allergic to wheat. Now, the wheat that we eat today is far different from the ancient Einkorn wheat that was, where it's come from. Wheat is a hexaploid, which contains sets of chromosomes with 3 complete genomes termed A, B, and D in the nucleus of every cell. So modern wheat has been crossed with 2 different kinds of goat grasses, and goat grasses contain the D genome, which is the source of gluten intolerance. That's what they test for when they test to see if you're intolerant to gluten. But Einkorn does not contain this troublesome D genome. It only has the A genome. And most testing for gluten intolerance is based on this. And while Einkorn does contain gluten, it's a completely different type of gluten. And it allows for easier digestion and nutrient absorption. And Einkorn has 50% less or more of the phytic acid that's in regular wheat that really keeps us from getting the nutrients out of the wheat. When you have a sourdough starter to make a loaf of bread, you deactivate all of the phytic acid, which inhibits the nutrient absorption. And it often can lead to nutritional deficiencies if you eat regular wheat. So making bread with a sourdough culture and an Einkorn sourdough culture is a win-win when it comes to deactivating phytic acid. So all of this just to say that I have noticed a big difference in my digestion. And there's been a lot of things going on when I switched all to Einkorn. I still will have sourdough, regular sourdough too sometimes, but I've really been mostly focusing on einkorn because I've noticed such a difference in even my elimination, in how much energy I have. It's been I've really seen a profound difference in einkorn, and I use it for everything. I make pancakes with it, and the good thing about einkorn is that you don't have to make everything with sourdough because there's so much less phytic acid and this allows so much more absorption. It doesn't have that gluten that causes problems. And so I can make quick loaves of bread that don't do the sourdough, and I seem to do very well on them where I don't if I use regular wheat. And I use it in scones and muffins, and they make the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. And I really, really like einkorn flour, and so does my family. So I'm going to give you a bunch of recipes too, so you can kind of see what I've been doing. And but first, I want to talk to you about how to work with an einkorn sourdough starter to make really good einkorn sourdough bread, which is just the best. So I developed an einkorn sourdough starter for people to sell. I had a dry one that I dehydrated, but now I sell a live one because there was such a demand for it. And I want to tell you, it's a little bit different than the other sourdough. It's not, it's not more time consuming. It's just you feed it differently because of einkorn flour does work a little bit different. So the secret to really good einkorn sourdough bread is to make sure your starter's bubbly, your einkorn starter's bubbly. And I'll put a link below if you'd like to take a look at my starter. And I also tell you how to convert your starter into your regular sourdough starter into an einkorn starter if you want to do that, because that works really well. So you want to always feed your starter before you bake your bread. So what you do with einkorn, which is a little bit different than regular sourdough, is you take out 2 teaspoons of your starter. So you don't need to keep a lot of starter in your fridge. And then you mix that 2 teaspoons of the sourdough starter in your fridge with 1/4 cup of water and 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour or 1/2 cup of whole wheat einkorn flour. And I have the grams on here. And I highly recommend you use a scale and do it by the grams, because for all purposes, it's 60 grams. For whole wheat, it's 48 grams, and it does make a difference. So get you a good scale. It'll make a difference when you're making the bread and feeding the starter. Now, after you put this flour and water into the 2 teaspoons of the starter, and don't use more of the starter because people like to they feel bad about not using all their starter. And you can use your starter in other things. You can put it in cookies and things, but don't use more because it's going to consume all those nutrients if you have too much starter. So you want to do it this way. Then you leave it on the counter for 4 to 12 hours. And that all depends on the temperature in your home. If your temperature is, 75 or 70 to 75, it's usually going to take 4 hours. If it's colder than that, it's going to take longer. But don't let it go too long because then it'll lose its bubbles and it won't be bubbly anymore. So once it's bubbly, measure out the same amount of starter for your recipe, whatever you need for that recipe, and leave a little bit in the jar. I mean, you can just leave very little in the jar and you still can feed it and make more starter. So always feed that extra starter, 2 tablespoons of water and 2 tablespoons of flour, whatever is left in that jar, just to keep it going, and then stick it back in the fridge. So always feed the starter before you want to make the bread, either the night before or during the day. Just depends on the temperature in your home, about 4 hours. The warmer it is, the faster it will go. And then once your starter's ready and bubbly, it's ready to go. So making sure you feed the starter at least once a week is really important if you're keeping it in the fridge. If you haven't been feeding your starter regularly, you might need to do 2 feedings to get it bubbly again. But I always feed it this same kind of ratio and stick it in the fridge for a week. So if I've got instructions on here if you're feeding your starter for the first time. If you just got a sourdough starter from me, there's just going to be a little bit of starter in the jar, and you're going to feed it, 1/4 cup of lukewarm water, 1/2 cup of flour, and just mix it up in the jar and let it get bubbly. And it's pretty easy. And then once you do that, you can transfer it to a bigger jar if you want. So if you want to feed your starter, but you don't want to bake with it, if you just want to do the once a week method to keep it alive in the fridge, make sure you do it once a week because einkorn consumes the food very fast. So you need to feed at least once a week to keep your starter active. And you just simply do what I said before. Take 2 teaspoons of the starter out of the fridge and discard the rest, or use it in another recipe. And we've got some recipes for sourdough things that you can use that in. Feed your starter half a cup of einkorn, fourth a cup of water, and mix it well. Put the lid back on and put it in the fridge. And your sourdough starter needs to be warm before you use it. But if you're just feeding it, once a week in the fridge, those temperatures slow way down and they keep it fed for a week. What you would normally feed it on the counter the same amount to get it bubbly. But because the refrigerator is cold, it slows it down so it lasts longer. So now there are different types of flour to feed your einkorn because there's an all-purpose flour or there's a whole wheat flour to feed your starter. And it really depends on what kind of things you're making. I like the all-purpose flour, but the whole wheat's good too. It doesn't rise as high when you make bread because it has the wheat germ in it, and so it's more of a dense bread. The all-purpose flour is what I normally use because it makes better bread, lighter and rises higher. But the einkorn, the whole wheat flour, actually will be more bubbly if you use the whole wheat flour to feed it because it has the minerals in it. But einkorn all-purpose flour works good too. So a whole wheat starter also will ferment faster than the einkorn all-purpose and is more thirsty. So give it maybe an extra tablespoon of water if its starter seems kind of thick to you. Give it a little bit of water. Now, einkorn absorbs water more slowly, so give it time before you give it that because it does take a little bit of time for it to absorb the water. There are several places you can buy einkorn flour. I'm seeing it a lot in health food stores now. So check with your health food store to see if they sell the einkorn flour. You can also get it from Jovial Foods, which is where I get mine. I also have another link if you want to buy it in bulk that I will put on the article that you can go look at because I always link an article to my podcast and you can go check it and I've got a link to that. I've also got a link to where you can buy it on Amazon, but it's popping up everywhere. And the more the people use it, the more it will be available for people. And I love it. It's fabulous. Now, you can use almost any type of water to feed your starter, although filtered or purified water works the best. I've even, many people have even used tap water. Some bakers say it's not the best, but I think it still works fine. Spring water with minerals is my preferred choice. Distilled water I don't like because it removes the minerals. And one of the things about fermentation is it loves minerals. And so does your body. So I always reverse osmosis or distilled water. I never use that ever for anything because I want those minerals in the water. And it will make a better end product. My two favorite salts to use are Celtic sea salts, the finely ground, or the Himalayan salt is wonderful too. That again has a lot of minerals in it. Any salt will work, but I just think those are great because they have minerals. And again, fermentation likes minerals. So troubleshooting. If your sourdough starter's been sitting in the fridge for more than a week and you haven't fed it, you can usually revive it, no problem. You just need to feed it a couple of times, 2 to 3 days on the counter, twice a day, like morning and night to get it up to snuff and get it working again. And as soon as it starts to be bubbly, then you're ready to go. You'll see bubbles. It'll have a nice smell, aroma, kind of a sourdough smell. And once that happens, you can make bread with it. But it's got to be bubbly before you put it because that bubbliness means it's going to rise your bread. If it's flat, it's not going to rise your bread. So if you don't want to make a bread with it, then just stick it back in the starter. Just stick it back in the fridge. Once you've fed it and it's gotten bubbly, then feed it again and put it back in the fridge if you don't want to use it right away. And it's again 2 teaspoons of the starter, 1/4 cup of water, and a 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour or a 1/2 cup of whole wheat flour. And if it's too thick, you can add a little bit more, like a tablespoon of water. So always leave a little bit of starter in your jar to make sure you have enough to make more starter. Now, if you see like a hooch or a discoloration on the top, don't be alarmed. This is the alcohol that has separated from the fermentation and come to the surface. They call it the hooch. It can be dark in color and it can even be kind of a grayish color, like a film. Don't worry. It's just part of the fact that it's running out of food to eat and it's letting you know. You could discard that hooch or discard it or scrape it off if you want. It's just a byproduct of the starter eating all the food, and it means it's hungry and it wants to be fed. So give it fresh flour and water, and it should get back up to snuff. So I have a bunch of recipes for you. I have my einkorn sourdough bread recipe. I also have links to, I have a dehydrated starter too, by the way. that you can buy. If you don't want to make bread right away and you don't want to get the live starter, I also have a dehydrated starter that you can get, and you can use. That'll last for 6 months on your counter until you're ready to make the bread. And then you basically just rehydrate it, give it flour and water, and you get your sourdough starter. I want to tell you about my recipes though. I have not a live, but a sourdough einkorn sourdough bread that's good. But I also have a sandwich sourdough bread that's delicious. I have cranberry scones, cultured cranberry scones that I make with einkorn, but you can make any kind of scones with einkorn. I have a Swiss roll with cultured cream, einkorn flour pie crust, and a date pie crust. I have all different kinds of recipes on here, and I have even more. I have a Biotic Pro membership site, and I have even more for them. I have a free ebook for them that I think it came out a while back. So if you didn't get access to that and you're listening to this podcast and you're a member, send me an email at culturedfoodlife.com. You can go to our page and hit the contact button and we can send you that. But we're going to be adding to that and making that bigger. And I just have a lot of recipes that I make on a regular basis that I'm adding more and more to so people can start to use this flour. Guys, I really think it is it's a real secret to helping people really get more nutrients, be healthy, and it really helps your blood sugar. And it was really interesting. I was doing a class at 123 Farms, which is, I think it's Spring Hill Ranch, California. And I was talking about einkorn. And one of the guys in the audience also does a lot of work with einkorn. And he was telling me that even Dr. Davis, who wrote Wheat Belly, who's against wheat, he doesn't know as much about the sourdough as I do. He doesn't really write about that, but he did try einkorn, tested it on himself. In the back of his book, you can read about it. And he said that he didn't have any of the reactions to einkorn that he had to regular wheat because he has severe wheat allergies. He never had, I think he had sleeplessness. He would throw up. This is with regular wheat. He has pretty bad allergies. But when he made einkorn and he made his own bread, he didn't have any of those reactions, and his blood sugar didn't go as high, he noticed. And he put that in his book, his numbers, and it was quite significant. And it's a very different kind of wheat. So even he hasn't ever tested sourdough, but even he didn't have the reactions to the wheat that most people who have wheat allergies do. Einkorn is just a completely different food. And it's the most ancient wheat there is. It's the one that's been the most untouched of all of them. So check it out. It is, I can't believe it's got so many good properties in it. You'll notice a difference if you consume it. And it's nice for people who can't have regular wheat to have this. Most people who really struggle with wheat can do pretty good on sourdough bread. My daughter, that's one of the reasons I started making regular sourdough bread, was because she couldn't handle wheat, but she could handle sourdough. And I see that a lot. But if you have really severe allergies, sometimes it means your gut is very messed up or you just have an allergy to it. And einkorn would be a really good thing for you. So anytime you ferment something, whether it's regular wheat or einkorn, you're really going to change that product into a brand new product. And it's quite astounding. I'm just having a lot of fun with this. I'm enjoying it. And I feel better. I was really surprised that I kind of was doing an experiment to see what would happen if I just did the einkorn. And I got some of the einkorn pastas just, to try them, see how I do. And I do very, very well with it. So anyway, I'm just trying to give you guys options for those of you who have a lot of food allergies and things like that. And remember, a lot of food allergies, most of them are caused by missing gut bacteria. And that happened to my daughter, and there's a lot of research to support that now. Research that's been done all over the world. And what has happened is so many people have been taking antibiotics and some harmful types of drugs that has destroyed their gut bacteria. And they have to have those bacteria to digest their food. And without them, they don't do well. I have a friend right now who suddenly, she had to take a lot of antibiotics because she got bronchitis and she got pneumonia, actually, is what happened. And she's been taking antibiotics for a while now, quite a bit. And she's never had cultured foods. And she started developing all these allergies, severe allergies, allergic reactions to gluten and to other products. And she was desperate. And she came to me And she started having, I gave her some easy kefir. I gave her some HMOs, which is a prebiotic that helps you restore your bifidobacteria, which is a big one for food allergies. And I gave her some of that she took for a couple of weeks, and she made a kefir smoothie every day, and she put apple peel powder and Simple Reds powder, which is a red phenol powder, which is just berries and fruits that feed that good gut bacteria. And she said it was astounding what happened to her. But then she stopped doing it for a couple of days, and her allergy symptoms and the histamine responses were coming back when she didn't have it. She goes, I don't know if it's just in my head but it seems like if I have the kefir every morning, I'm fine. But if I don't, after a couple of days, it all starts coming back. And I believe that's because kefir and all the red phenol powders, they have an anti-inflammatory, especially kefir, like 19 anti-inflammatory markers. And so it was calming down the inflammation in her body and trying to heal her gut and restore those gut bacteria that she had hurt with so many antibiotics. And so then when she doesn't have it, it can't do its job because it's not completely restored yet. And those anti-inflammatory markers keep those histamines and those allergic reactions and keep them in check because it's just calming everything down. And without it, she's getting inflammation, which is causing her reactions. It takes a little bit of while to heal yourself when you've really kind of destroyed your gut lining, because she took HMOs, which are human milk oligosaccharides. They're a fermented product, and they're what you get at birth from your mother. And the good people at Layer Origins figured out how to make this product. It's not actually human milk. It's just a fermented product it's a prebiotic that you feed, starts to restore your bifidobacteria. And then the Simple Reds, which is a red phenol powder with berries and fruits and apple peels, things that the body likes to feed those good bacteria, especially Akkermansia, which makes up a fourth of your gut and keeps your gut lining intact so that you don't get leaky gut. And so when you have all those things, it really starts to restore it. Many people are missing or killing the bifidobacteria in their gut, and that's a really important bacteria. It's one of the biggest ones you have, and it feeds all your other bacteria, so it's really important. And then kefir has 50 other bacteria in it that feeds bifido and will help restore those missing gut bacteria. And it's very simple. It takes 5 minutes a day. And so anyway, she is doing very well now. Again, when she has it, she's fixing her gut, and something that needed to be done for a long time. And I suspect that many of you out there that are struggling with food allergies would benefit greatly from maybe switching to Einkorn and also having kefir smoothies and starting to fix the missing gut bacteria in your gut. And as my daughter did many, many years ago, she went from having multiple food allergies to within a year having all of those gone, and she could eat anything. And she had a cultured food every day, almost at every meal. And it was amazing. In a few months, she was off and running. So that's just a few things that could help you if you're struggling. And I sure do love the Einkorn. I just wanted to tell you about it because I can't stop making stuff. And I had to stop making so many cookies. I couldn't stop making the chocolate chip oatmeal cookies. They were so good because they were like, oh my gosh, I love them. I love the flavor. It gives a different type of flavor. My son was funny. I had some sourdough bread and I had the Einkorn bread, and I have a new recipe. I need to write it up. I've been putting flax seeds in it. Oh my gosh, it's so good because Einkorn has a little bit of a nutty flavor, but with flaxseed, it really enhances it. And he was saying there's just nothing better than this. It has this flavor I can't describe. I can't describe it either, but I really like it. So anyway, that's just a few little tips and tricks for you. Just things I do on a regular basis to make my life better and to enjoy my food. We've demonized so many food products now that, it's hard to enjoy things without worrying about it. But this is one of those foods that's terrific. It's the most ancient wheat there is. It's the one everything else came from. It's the purest form. And they stopped making it because it didn't yield a high crop. So financially, it wasn't as profitable as those other wheats. But I think it's so worth it. So anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Check out the website. Check out all the recipes. Check out the different ways you can use einkorn. It's really fun. I hope you'll start to incorporate it. It's made a big difference for me. So have a good week, guys, and we'll talk to you next time.